friends, I'm Michelle Hansen, and I'm coming to you today from snowy Michigan, where it was warm, but now the snow is coming down, and I know Mr. Hansen was a little disappointed about it, but I keep reminding him it is still January. You can find me on Ravelry as MK Hansen and on Instagram as Quimby Cottage, and I'm really excited to be sitting here today. I have a lot of respect for podcasters who put out a lot of material. I have to tell you, I'm trying to podcast about every 2 weeks, and I'm finding that I'm not as prolific as I thought I was before I started marking my crafting by podcasting twice a week. So sorry about that. So maybe this will be a little bit short. I thought I would start by telling you what I'm wearing today. This is my ranunculus sweater. I made it last fall. I love it. It's made of Shibui Silk Cloud and Shibui Echo, and there's a lot of silk in both of those yarns, so the drape on this is really wonderful. It was kind of pricey for me. I really love it, and I would love to make a lot of sweaters out of it just because I love the fabric so much. But as of right now, this is my only project made with those yarns. I'll continue on by telling you what I finished, which is not very much. I have been working on a few small projects, and that just reignited my interest in these itty bitty sweaters by Pat Blair. I've made do more. This one is striped, and I love them. I just think they're so charming. These need to be blocked, but I just can't leave alone the tiny knits. I'm kind of inspired by that woman, I don't remember her name, who knitted all those tiny Coraline sweaters, and she used pins. I don't know how she did it. These are knit on 1.5, size 1.5 needles, but I just love them so much. I think they're charming. This orange yarn I bought on our trip to New Orleans, and I really, really love it. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? This I bought at the Quarter Stitch, which is the yarn store in the French Quarter. And it's smooshy with cashmere in a special colorway just for New Orleans called Mango Freeze. It is supposed to be reminiscent of the slushies that they sell during the Jazz Fest, which I've never attended, but I would love to go back and do that one day. Anyway, this orange just is so bright and cheerful, and I just can't get enough of it. I partnered that orange with this red for this striped sweater. This red is by Fiber Story. It's called Fave, I think. And the color is called Samba. It has a little bit of kind of purple in it, and I just think it's a really great red. But I just think it especially goes with this orange. These could be a colorway on their own even. But isn't that cute? So needless to say, I have another one on the needles. So I finished the body on this, and I just have to put the arms on, and then I'll block them. And then, hopefully I'll be over this little obsession, but you never know. This one I plan to send to a friend, but these others maybe I'll send this one instead. I just think they're so cute that I couldn't stop after just one. And we went yesterday to visit our uncle who lives about 2 hours away. And this is just perfect travel knitting for me. It just takes a ball of yarn. I have the pattern. It's not memorized, but I'm very familiar with it by this point, so I can do a lot of it. Once I finish these increases here and put the sleeves on waist yarn, I know this seems absurd, but once I do that, it's very easy for me just to crank the rest of them out. So I only have to pay attention for these first couple rows. I think you split off at row 11 here. Tiny knits makes my heart beat fast. I'm still working on my Stockbridge DK sweater by Isolde Teague. I've shown it a couple of times. I haven't made a lot of progress. I finished the back, and I started the left side, so of the front. I still have to finish that up, and then I have to start this side, and then I have to do 2 sleeves and the button band. I was starting to think that I was getting close to done with it, but now that I've rattled it all off to you, I realize there's still a lot of work on that to go. Maybe I should focus on that. But in the meantime, I am working on my second sock here. This is in the Skein Cocaine yarn that I bought at Vogue Knitting. I love it so much. Look at this. How could you not be cheered by this? And I finished this sock. This one's finished. This I did in a 3x1 rib, and again, this is just my purse knitting, so it travels with me when I go out and about, unless I'm obsessed with tiny sweater knitting. I love this so much that I actually bothered Skein Cocaine on Instagram. Can you imagine how great a sock set would be if you got this ball of yarn with any of these tiny speckles? Just pick one. There's like a little purple here, there's a little pink there, one of these greens, I mean these sort of gray colors, just any one of these colors in a mini skein would really be great in socks. But I also could imagine it as the edge of a shawl, or the cast on edge or the ribbing of a hat, and then that contrast yarn in a pom-pom. Let's all band together and bother her to do that, because I really feel like my life could be complete if I had just a Skein Cocaine set of one big ball of this and then a mini skein of some other color. Fingers crossed on that. Okay, so that's all the knitting. Super fast, right? I did get a message on, I think YouTube or maybe Instagram, asking if I would explain how I made the project bags that I talked about last week. So I'm just going to quickly go through that with you. This is the project bag that you'll remember that I made. I liked the shape, and I just copied the shape from my friend's vintage project bag that her grandmother had sent her. So I just laid this down on newspaper, I traced it out, and I added about 1/4 of an inch all the way around for a seam. And then I traced that out. That's how I made the pattern. Just to give you some rough estimates of the measurements, this bag is about 13 inches tall, and it is about 13.5 inches wide. So it's almost square. And then we have this little swoop here. So the handle of that swoop is about 7 inches from here to here. And then the width here at the top is about 3.5 inches. So those are the dimensions here. I laid this flat on the fabric, folded in half. So there's no seam except here at the bottom, which means this is the shape. I laid it like this with a fold in the fabric on this handle edge, and then I cut it out. And I did 2 so that I could have a lining. And then what I did was I sewed these 2 together, starting probably here, all the way around. And then I left a little bit. I included the pocket. I just added the pocket in there too. I actually stitched the pocket down in the middle here before I sewed these 2 together. So then I sewed them together, and I left them, there's a small space here where I left it open so that I could turn it inside out. I'm gonna see if I can find that for you, because I initially was gonna, yeah, here it is. I initially was gonna hand stitch this closed to make it really invisible, but I was lazy and I wanted them to be done fast. I have a lack of patience when sewing. So I just folded that little space closed and I stitched it together. So you can see from here to here that there's a little purple seam there. I don't know if you can see that. But from here to here, I stitched it. So I just turned it right side out, and then I stitched them together. So it wasn't challenging. It's not a difficult pattern. And I hope that that's kind of what you were looking for. It's not self-explanatory, but it seemed very simple to me to do. So as you can see, when I open it like this, you can see that I sewed them together in this way. I sewed up this way, I sewed around, I did the same thing here. And when they were all sewn together, then I went back and did a little top stitch here just to keep that nice and flat and even and looking sharp. And then I pressed it in between each of those layers. So the ironing board has to be out when I'm sewing. And that's it. They were pretty simple. I don't know if I would have attempted this if I didn't have that little pattern. I'm not actually a very adventurous sewer. So if I hadn't been able to trace this, I don't know if I would have been bold enough to just do it. But if you are, I think it's great. And, you know, have at it. I really do like it. It's a nice shape. I can stand and knit, and I have done that many times, which is good because Carson Demmers talked to us at Vogue Knitting in Columbus about the importance of posture and taking care of our bodies and not sitting in a knitter's nest. So the ergonomics of knitting and the muscle groups that we use, it's important for us to stand and use other parts of our muscles, not sit in one spot for a long time. So I'm really appreciative to have this. It's a great project bag for a small portable project or a larger project. You can stand and knit quite easily, especially if you're not doing something that takes a lot of thinking about it. If you're just in the stockinette in the round part of a sweater or something like that, it would be pretty easy to do, I think. Or even just sleeve island, it might be nice. And you could put the bulk of the sweater in the bag and then just have the sleeve out, and then you could just knit in the round there. So I think there are a lot of uses for it. I do really like it. And what I like about those pockets is that I can put my wallet in there, my phone, granola bar, you know, the emergency rations that a knitter on the go needs. So I hope that that's helpful to you. Another sweet little crafty thing that I've done recently is I sewed a little bonnet out of a handkerchief. And this is for a friend who's expecting a baby. There's a little poem, which I just copied from online, about how the handkerchief is a sweet little bonnet and it goes on the baby's head. And then someday you can take it apart and it becomes a handkerchief for the wedding day. If it's a girl, for her wedding, and if it's a boy, it can be the something old. And I just think it's a cute little baby gift to give. This handkerchief is linen with a bit of lace. I found it at one of those little, I used to live in Cincinnati, and there was a little store there that carried handkerchiefs. They're sort of hard to find, although here in Chelsea, Michigan, where I live now, near Ann Arbor, there's a little store that has handkerchiefs too. So I don't think they're as hard to find as you might think. And if you had a grandmother or something with a stash of handkerchiefs, that would be a great source as well, especially if you were doing sort of a family heirloom type thing. It starts with a handkerchief. I bought this at a little shop. This is linen, and then it has a bit of lace to it. I like them to be fairly plain. Now, I don't mind the lace, but I don't like there to be much of a pattern on the handkerchief. That's just a personal preference. So I start by giving it a little press. This one has not been pressed. It was sold to me like this. So that's how this one came. But I start by giving it a little press, and then I fold the handkerchief into thirds, sort of. A little more than half for the big part. And then the small end of it, I fold. So it looks sort of like this, and then I give it a light press. I don't like to do a hard press because eventually this is going to be unfolded from a bonnet and turned into a handkerchief. So I don't really want the pressing to be really permanent. So from this position, I fold the handkerchief like so, and then I take a needle and thread and I just do a running stitch through here, and then I pull it tight and then it gathers. So that's what creates this little circle in the back. And then you can see that that just kind of stays put. I did do a little tack here and here just to make sure that these ends don't flop over. And then I sewed a little ribbon here that matches the ribbons here. So then, once you've done that running stitch in the back, you just have this front piece, and just to make sure that this doesn't open up, you just tack the ribbon, the little bow here with the ribbon that ties the hat together. You can put them a little closer to the front if you want, and then tack this end down so it doesn't fold if you like. You can fold it up like so and tack the ribbons here and then let them hang down so that it gives it kind of a little bit of a decorative edge. I didn't do that on this one. I just tacked it down here. I didn't even tack this little end because I feel like it sort of substantial enough. But it's a sweet little baby gift. It's a nice way to use up some of those grandma handkerchiefs into little heirlooms. It's kind of traditional, and I get that not everybody's into that, but I just think it's still really sweet, and it just appeals to that little old granny piece of my heart. So anyway, I thought I would just quickly tell you how I did that in case you wanted to make one too. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about is just another hobby. Some of you might know I have pen pals. I like to write letters, and so I maintain a couple of pen pals. They're people I met through like an online pen pal match group, and some of those people I've been corresponding with for about 8 years, some longer. And I thought I would tell you that old-fashioned mail is still really fun for me to receive and send. So to that end, one of the things I like to do is make my own envelopes, and so does my friend who writes me. So I thought I would show you some examples of these are homemade envelopes that have come to my house. You can see they're addressed to me, and the paper on them is just really cool. And they're made of, like this one I think is a calendar. The imaging on them is just really cool. Sometimes it's just writing. So these are the ones that I've received. I thought I would share with you. But then I thought I would also show you some that I would send. So these are a few that I've already made. And there's no letters in them, so they haven't been sent yet. These are from a picture book, a child's picture book, Eloise. This is from a magazine, an image I liked from a magazine. This is from a book of old architecture, like a coffee table book. This is from an illustrated Alice in Wonderland, and I think this is actually from a catalog. So what I do is I start by looking for interesting paper. Sometimes it's a little controversial. If I'm at a secondhand bookstore or a library book sale, I have been known to buy a book just to take it apart. I know that's controversial, and a lot of you will be screaming at me that books are sacred, and I believe that that's true. If you're not going to read it, I believe in using it. So to that end, I bought a while back this book, which was published in 1991, so it's almost 20 years old. It is filled with beautiful pictures of flowers, and they were probably intended to be taken apart and framed. They're all beautiful, but who needs hundreds of these in their house? I certainly don't. So I have been taking it apart and making, as you can see, I've been taking it apart and making this into envelopes as well. So I'll show you how I do that. The first thing I did was I started with a template. This is one. I started with a template. This is one template that I sometimes use. I don't like this one as much because the envelope that it makes is smaller. I prefer this template. I just found an envelope template online and I printed it out onto cardstock. And this is not really thick cardstock. And then I traced it out and cut it. So I just used this as my form. This, I did the same thing. As I said, this is just a different envelope size and I didn't care for it as much. Then what I do is I trace the envelope shape on the outside of the page and then I cut it out. And then I just fold it up, and before I mail it, I put one of these little labels on. I just bought a pack of labels in the office supply section of, I think I bought these at Target, but you can buy them anywhere. They're just labels. They're not even called address labels. They're just called labels. And I think there's 4 to a sheet. And I just peel it and stick it right there so that when I mail my letter, I have a good place to write the address on. And then you can see I folded this already and made it into an envelope. But when I mail it, I use a piece of packing tape and I just go right across that bottom so that it overlaps a bit, and I cross it over so that it's good and sealed across the back and then in the front. And then for my paper, some of my paper is not as thick as other paper. So especially, for example, this one is fairly thin, so that this packing tape will give it some structure, and it goes through the post totally fine. These envelopes from my friend, from my pen pal, Rena, she uses a glue stick or something like that for her sealing. And you can see sometimes I am careful and I use my envelope opener to open these. And sometimes I just rip into them, which I probably did for this one, which is why that edge is probably not so nice. It's just a really fun way to reuse fun paper and to get something fun in the mail. So I thought I would just share it with you. When I get a letter like this in the mail, it feels like a present. It's gift wrapped, and then inside, of course, are the words of my friend. So it's just a great way to reuse paper, and I just thought I would share with you one more crafty thing. So I know this has been kind of short. Sorry I'm not that prolific. That's all I have to share with you today. So I hope you're having a great season. I know February, for some reason, feels really, really long. I think it's because most of us who live in a cold climate are sort of done with it. To be honest with you, I am looking forward to summer, but I also don't really mind the snow, and we haven't had a lot of it here. Oh, we'll see what February brings. Anyway, happy crafting. Thanks very much for watching. I know you guys are very busy people, and I appreciate any minute that you're spending with me. Bye.